And we turn to Syria. No country has been more affected by the uprising than its neighbor to the north, Turkey. Thousands of refugees have flooded across the border, and stray mortar shells routinely land near Turkish towns. Margaret Warner is on a reporting trip to the region. I spoke with her from Istanbul a short time ago about Turkey's role in the conflict and its relationship with the U.S. Margaret, welcome. The death toll has passed a significant milestone, 40,000 people, and the war is said to be widening. What's changing inside Syria, and how is that affecting Turkey?
Well, what's clear, Ray, is what isn't changing is the loss of life. We saw that in northwestern Syria, where Assad's ground forces had withdrawn, but the relentless bombing from the air continued, so people were still dying there. Then as we have moved eastward in Turkey, on the Turkish side of the border, it's apparent that the violence in Syria, the fighting, is also moving eastward too. And the new wrinkle here is that in some areas from which the government forces have withdrawn, there's now a new battle front between the Kurds, who have taken control of some of these towns, and the Free Syrian Army, the rebels, who are otherwise winning territory in other parts of Syria. So actually, as you said, the conflict is widening with more players, and of course that will only bring more loss of life.
The Kurds, of course, a transnational people living in Turkey, in Iraq, and in Syria. But I thought the old idea was the enemy of my enemy is my friend. How come the Free Syrian forces are fighting against the Kurds?
Well, that old adage doesn't apply to Syria's Kurds. Syria's Kurds have been so marginalized, perhaps the most in any of their actually four countries, because Iran also has Kurds. They weren't even citizens of Syria. And they don't trust the Free Syrian Army, the Sunni Arab rebels. They don't have a bond with them, and they don't trust them any more than they did Assad. And they don't trust that in a post-Assad Syria, if it was completely run by the rebels, the rebels we know of, that they would have any more rights than they did under Assad. And so instead, they've been training over in camps in Iraqi Kurdistan and hoping to take advantage of this chaos to carve out areas that could ultimately become an independent Syrian Kurdish state.
In the meantime, as Syria's war widens, the pressure on Turkey has grown, as we've seen from your previous reporting here on the NewsHour. But recently, the Ankara government has made an interesting request to NATO. Tell us more about it.
You're absolutely right, Ray. Turkey has requested, actually a week or so ago, for NATO to send Patriot missile batteries to defend Turkey's border and airspace against any incoming of any sort that would come in from Syria or elsewhere. It's no secret that Prime Minister Erdogan of Turkey and Syrian President Assad have been on the outs ever since Erdogan, 16 months ago, called on Assad to step down. And in these sort of, as you know, Turkish forces have been moved to the border. There have been some back and forth. It's become very apparent and widely discussed in the media here that despite having the second largest army in NATO after the U.S., Turkey's air defenses are not that great. So what Turkey is saying to NATO is we need to just defend our airspace. There is, however, speculation that it might also be Turkey's backdoor way of putting in a cornerstone from which NATO ultimately might create a no-fly zone inside Syria. And that is something Turkey has been calling for months now, because they want to create a zone in which the internally displaced in Syria can go and be safe without coming into Turkey. Turkey's already paying a huge price and a huge burden for 120,000 just refugees in camps that they have there, and they're really getting to the breaking point on that.
Our Margaret Warner in Istanbul, thanks for joining us.
Margaret's next report delves further into the fighting by the Kurds in Syria and its political impact on Turkey. Plus, you can see her earlier stories and blog posts. That's on our World page.